The sun began to set over the mountains of Arizona, casting the sky in warm orange and purple hues. Jack Reynolds, a 37-year-old veteran, slowly made his way toward the city's animal shelter. His worn boots clattered on the sidewalk, reminding him with each step of the heaviness of the past years. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Since leaving the Army 2 years ago, he had struggled to fill the void that had opened in his life. Neither work nor therapy had been able to close this gap. Rex, his loyal German shepherd, had accompanied him on countless dangerous missions. But after an injury, Rex had been retired. Since then, Jack had tried to cope without his four-legged companion, but it wasn't the same. The shelter in front of him was small and inconspicuous. The rusty fences and makeshift dog houses exuded the smell of disinfectant, mixed with occasional barking from inside. Jack had come here at the request of his older sister, Emily, who firmly believed that a dog could help him cope with the aftermath of his service. Hesitant, he entered the shelter, sensing deep inside that this visit was an important step, even though he didn't know why. He walked through the narrow aisles, casting a scrutinizing glance at the dogs in the cages. Some barked and wagged their tails enthusiastically, trying to get his attention, while others watched him silently, their eyes filled with quiet melancholy. But none seemed to have the special spark he had once shared with Rex. Just as he was about to give up, a young shelter worker approached him. "Mr. Reynolds, we have a German shepherd in the back that you might be interested in. He came here a few weeks ago, but he's something special." Jack looked at her in surprise and nodded silently. Wordlessly, he followed her to a secluded part of the shelter. In one of the cages at the very back corner, there lay a large dog with black and brown fur. His posture was tense, but his eyes were tired. Jack's heart began to race. He would have recognized this dog anywhere. "Rex," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The shepherd sluggishly lifted his head and looked at him, but there was no recognizable emotion. No wagging tail, no excitement to greet him, only an empty gaze, as though Jack were a stranger. "He doesn't recognize me," murmured Jack as he stepped back. A pain surged through him as he spoke those words, but something held him back from giving up on this reunion dream. It was Rex, he was sure of it. The dog that had once saved his life was now just a shadow of his former self. The scars on Rex's hind leg and one of his ears told the stories of the battles they had fought together. But the eyes that had once been full of life and energy were now dark and distant. Jack recognized the invisible wounds because he carried the same burdens. "He's been through a lot," the worker explained softly. "He was found in another state, in a smaller shelter. It seems like someone abandoned him who couldn't handle him. He suffers from anxiety and doesn't trust people as easily anymore." She paused and looked at Jack before asking, "Do you know him?" Jack slowly nodded, his voice barely a whisper as he replied, "Yes, he was once my partner, my best friend." For a moment his thoughts drifted to the memories, the intense training where they learned to trust each other blindly, the dangerous missions where Rex had saved his life more than once, and the lonely nights when the dog had kept him from breaking down. And now, after all these years, Rex didn't recognize him anymore. The worker carefully opened the cage. Rex watched her, but made no move to approach. Jack knelt slowly and extended his hand. "Hey, buddy, it's Jack," he said softly, his voice trembling, but he held it steady. Rex tilted his head slightly as though trying to understand, but remained tense. The worker broke the silence. "Would you like to spend some time with him? We can bring him to the yard." Jack nodded immediately. In the play area, Rex kept his distance, sniffing the air but avoiding any direct contact. Jack watched him patiently, trying to decipher the dog's thoughts. As the sun set, Jack made a promise to himself. "I won't give up until I bring him back." His voice was calm, but his determination was unmistakable. When they finally left, Rex lay on the back of Jack's truck, wrapped in a blanket Jack had brought just for him. The dog kept his gaze fixed out the window, avoiding any eye contact. Jack kept glancing at him, hopeful that, somehow, Rex would remember. The rearview mirror, he knew that the path to earning Rex's trust wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to walk it. They both carried burdens that made them alike. When they arrived home, Jack parked in front of his modest house on the outskirts of the city. The small property was surrounded by a generous garden with a few trees rustling in the wind. It was quiet, but Jack knew this was the first step on a long journey, for Rex and for him. Jack opened the truck door and called Rex, but the dog hesitated. After a few seconds, he slowly stepped down and took cautious steps. Every movement was deliberate, as if he was constantly assessing his surroundings. Jack led Rex to the front door and opened it carefully. "Welcome to your new home, buddy," he said, trying to sound cheerful, though a hint of uncertainty was in his voice. Every moment seemed unpredictable, and Jack braced himself for the unexpected. Determined to create a cozy environment, Jack had prepared a spot in the corner of the living room. There lay a new dog bed, food and water bowls, and a few toys he had bought on the way home. "That's your spot, Rex," he said, pointing to the corner. But the German Shepherd remained still, ignoring the invitation, simply standing there. Jack sighed, feeling a wave of frustration wash over him as he prepared some food in the kitchen. His thoughts drifted. He remembered the days when Rex had run toward him full of energy, loyal, lively, a faithful companion. But now this dog seemed different, in a way Jack understood all too well. He glanced at Rex, who was still standing in the same spot, staring off into the distance. "I know how you feel, buddy. I feel just as lost," Jack murmured, more to himself than to the dog. That night, Jack left the bedroom door open, hoping Rex would feel safe enough to come closer. As he turned off the light, he heard soft footsteps on the floor. However, Rex didn't come to him, but lay near the bedroom door, still keeping his distance. In the darkness, Jack couldn't help but smile. It was a small step, but for him, it marked the beginning of something bigger. The next morning, Jack woke up to the sound of quiet steps in the hallway. Rex was sitting near the door, watching him attentively with perked ears. The dog stayed silent and still for a while, and for a moment, Jack felt a spark of hope. Maybe Rex did remember him. "Good morning," Jack said, stretching and forcing a smile. But the German Shepherd just turned away and slowly trotted back to his corner of the room. Determined to rebuild their connection, Jack spent most of the day interacting with Rex. He grabbed a tennis ball and threw it to him, but Rex didn't respond. He placed a bowl of fresh food next to him, but Rex didn't approach until Jack had left the room. Every attempt to get close was met with cool distance. Jack felt the sting of rejection, but he knew it was more than just fear. It was mistrust, maybe even deep pain. That afternoon, Jack decided to try something new. He pulled an old, worn military vest out of the closet, the same one he had worn during their deployments. The familiar smell of sand, sweat, and the battlefield clung to the vest, and Jack held it in his hands for a moment. "Let's see if you remember this, buddy," he said quietly, carrying the vest into the backyard where Rex lay. Rex lifted his head and looked at the vest curiously. His head tilted slightly, as though something within him was stirred. Jack felt a flicker of hope flare up. He laid the vest on the ground and took a step back to give Rex space to approach. But instead, the dog backed away. His tail drooped, and he retreated into himself. Jack sighed deeply. The hope that had flared up for a moment quickly faded. That night, he sat on the porch, watching Rex in the backyard. The dog stared silently at the stars above, as if lost in thought. "I won't give up on you, Rex," Jack said out loud, his voice firm and filled with a mix of determination and melancholy. It was as if he were speaking to the wind. "You didn't give up on me when I needed you most, and I won't give up on you now." He knew he was asking a lot, but he also knew that the bond between them was still there, though buried beneath layers of trauma. The air grew colder, and Jack decided to give Rex the space he needed. He went inside, left the back door open, and lay down to sleep. Hours later, he heard the sound of paws gently padding across the floor. The shadows on the floor woke him, and as he looked down at the foot of his bed, he saw Rex lying there, his eyes half closed. Jack said nothing but just smiled in the darkness. The distance between them melted away. It was a small step, but it was enough to reignite Jack's determination in the following days. Small moments began to appear like cracks in the wall of distrust that separated Jack and Rex. On Monday, while Jack was chopping wood in the garden, he noticed that Rex was watching him from a distance. The German Shepherd held his tail low, but there was a subtle curiosity in his eyes. Jack paused for a moment, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and playfully extended his hand. "Come on, buddy," he said in a gentle tone. Rex didn't approach. But he didn't look away either. Later that same day, while walking through the yard, Jack picked up a stick and tossed it lightly forward, not expecting much. To his surprise, Rex took a few hesitant steps toward it, stopped, and then returned to his place. Jack smiled. "You remember how to play, don't you? You're just pretending not to know," he said. Despite Rex's shy reaction, this moment felt like progress. On Tuesday, Jack decided to take Rex for a walk. He retrieved Rex's old name tag, cleaned it, and attached it to a new collar. "Let's go for a walk," Jack said, putting the leash on Rex. Rex hesitated as Jack opened the garden gate, looking out as if the world beyond the fence was hostile. But with a gentle pull on the leash, Jack managed to coax him to come along. During the walk, Rex seemed tense and alert. He kept sniffing the air, and his body was rigid, as if expecting danger at any moment. Jack noticed this and spoke calmly. "You don't have to be like this, buddy. We're safe here." He knew that these words meant little to Rex, but he hoped that the gentle tone would make a difference over time. On the way home, something unexpected happened. When Jack took off the leash, the dog came closer and sniffed his hand. Jack stood still, his heart pounding. "This is it," he murmured quietly, trying not to show too much emotion. He didn't move while Rex continued to explore his scent before slowly pulling away. This small gesture felt like a sign that something in Rex was beginning to change. That evening, while Jack was preparing dinner, Rex lay on the carpet near the kitchen. It wasn't an open invitation for affection, but the proximity was enough to show Jack that they were on the right path. He glanced at Rex and whispered, "I think we're going to be friends again. What do you think?" Rex didn't answer, but his gaze seemed less distant, as if a part of him recognized the man who had once meant everything to him. It was a gray morning, and the fog hung like a veil over the yard. Jack woke up early, as he always did, and found Rex already awake. The dog sat by the living room window, staring out lost in thought. Jack approached cautiously, aware that every interaction with Rex was a test of patience. After breakfast, Jack retrieved something special from an old wooden box he had kept since his military days. Among medals, photos, and letters, he found a worn rubber ball, a toy that Rex had loved during their breaks in the field. Jack held the ball in his hand for a moment, then went out into the yard where Rex was, gently rolling it onto the ground. Rex looked at the ball, his body tensing. He sniffed the air as if the ball was releasing a familiar scent buried deep in his memories. For a moment, it seemed like he was ignoring it, but then he stepped forward hesitantly, sniffed the ball cautiously, and then pulled back. Jack watched silently, noticing the inner struggle in the dog. "You don't remember, do you?" he asked quietly. That day, something seemed to shift. During lunch, Rex stayed closer to Jack, watching his every move. For the first time, he took food directly from Jack's hand. Jack could hardly believe what he was seeing, but he held back his emotions. Rex ate slowly, his gaze fixed on Jack, as if he was finally beginning to trust him again. Later, Jack sat on the porch with the ball in his hand, turning it between his fingers. "Do you remember when you brought me this thing in the middle of the night because you couldn't sleep?" He chuckled softly, recalling how Rex had tried to cheer him up back then. Jack gently tossed the ball across the yard, not expecting Rex to react. To his surprise, the dog perked up his ears and followed the ball with his eyes, even though he didn't move. When Rex lay beside Jack's bed that night, Jack noticed how the distance between them seemed to shrink, little by little, as if the weight was lifting. Before turning off the light, Jack looked at Rex and said, "We're almost there, partner." "We're almost there." The sun shone brightly the next morning, bathing the backyard in warm light. Jack prepared for another day with Rex and decided to try something new. He recreated one of the old training routines they used to practice on the battlefield. With a whistle around his neck and a rope in his hand, Jack hoped the exercise would trigger something in Rex's memory, something buried beneath the trauma and time. "Let's take it slow, buddy," Jack said as he walked into the center of the yard. Rex followed him from a safe distance, his eyes fixed on every movement Jack made. Jack whistled and gave a simple command, "Sit." For a moment, Rex remained still, but then he slowly lowered his body and sat down. "Good boy," Jack called out, his voice a mix of surprise and enthusiasm. Jack took the rubber ball and threw it a little farther to revive Rex's energy from the past. The dog hesitated, bending over the ball as if weighing his options. After a few seconds, Rex took a few hesitant steps toward the ball, stopped, looked at Jack, and finally picked it up with his mouth. A shiver ran down Jack's back. "You did it, buddy," Jack said as Rex turned and walked back with the ball. Something unexpected happened. Rex dropped the ball at Jack's feet and looked up at him. Jack hadn't seen that look in years. There was something in Rex's eyes, a spark of recognition, as if the German shepherd finally remembered who Jack was to him. The veteran felt his eyes tear up, but he kept his composure. He didn't want to scare Rex with his emotions. This moment marked a turning point. The rest of the day, Rex followed Jack around the house and even allowed small gestures of affection. When Jack sat on the couch, Rex lay next to him on the floor, something he had never done before. It wasn't just the training or the familiar objects. It seemed as if Rex was gradually letting down his guard and allowing Jack back into his life. That evening, while Jack was organizing his things, he found an old photo of himself and Rex from their time on the field. It had been taken on the day they completed a difficult mission. They both looked exhausted, but there was a gleam of pride in their eyes. Jack placed the photo on the nightstand and showed it to Rex. "Look at this, buddy. We were a great team, weren't we?" Rex stared at the photo for a few seconds before lying down next to Jack, closer than ever since his return. The distant rumble of thunder broke through the gray skies as the rain began to fall in Jack's backyard. Jack watched Rex, who stood near the porch, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if the dog were hypnotized by the dance of lightning and the drum of rain. Jack slowly approached, a cup of coffee in hand. "You've always loved storms, haven't you?" he murmured, mostly to himself. Rex slowly turned his head and looked at Jack, for the first time in weeks. It was a glance filled with hesitation, but also a hint of curiosity, a small sign that something was changing in Rex. Jack went to the cupboard and retrieved the old military whistle he had kept, along with other items from his service days. He knew it was a risk, but maybe the familiar sound would trigger a reaction from Rex. He returned to the porch and blew the whistle softly. Jack blew twice, short bursts, the same pattern he used in the field to call Rex to his side. The German shepherd sharply turned around, his ears briefly standing alert. Jack almost believed that Rex would run to him as he used to, but instead the dog took a hesitant step toward him before stopping again. The spark in his eyes faded, replaced by a shadow of doubt. Rex lowered his head as if fighting something inside. "It's okay, partner," Jack said in a soothing voice. "We'll go at your pace." As the rain grew stronger, Jack prepared a dry blanket and a bowl of fresh water for Rex, setting them in a corner of the room. He decided not to pressure him. Instead, Jack sat on the floor, not too close, but close enough to show Rex that he wasn't alone. Gradually, the dog relaxed, lying down on the carpet, casting furtive glances at Jack. As night fell, Rex surprised Jack by slowly approaching him. His heavy breathing echoed in the stillness of the room. Only a few inches from Jack, he stopped. The veteran stayed still, respecting the dog's space. Here's the English translation. Jack stayed still, not daring to move, as Rex sniffed the air around him, as if gathering the courage for something monumental. Finally, he hesitantly touched Jack's hand with his nose. The touch lasted only a moment, but it was enough to make Jack's heart race. "You're coming back to me, buddy," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. He tried not to pet Rex, not wanting to destroy the fragile moment. Jack remained calm, letting Rex set the pace, and he felt a wave of relief as the dog finally pulled back. That night, while the storm raged outside, Jack found Rex lying at the foot of his bed. The dog wasn't fully relaxed, but he seemed less distant than before. For Jack, that was all he needed, the proof that, despite all the pain and trauma, the bond between them still existed and was waiting to be rebuilt. The next morning, the sun rose bright, casting a golden glow over the yard. Jack sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched Rex slowly move across the wet grass. Something about his movements was different. They were less tense, and for brief moments, Rex didn't seem like a traumatized dog, but like the partner Jack had known before. Determined to keep moving forward, Jack picked up the old whistle again. It was a risky test, but he knew he had to try. Jack gave 2 short whistles, the same ones as the night before. This time Rex immediately lifted his head, his ears perked, and his whole body seemed to go on alert. Jack stayed calm, not rushing or expecting too much. "Come on, buddy," he murmured. To Jack's surprise, Rex made an encouraging sound, took a few steps toward him, and kept his gaze fixed on the whistle, as if searching for something familiar. Jack slowly picked up the rubber ball, held it in front of Rex for a moment, and then gently tossed it to the side. The dog hesitated, but something in his posture seemed to change. With an unexpected burst of energy, Rex ran after the ball, brought it back, and dropped it at Jack's feet. The veteran stood still, his eyes filled with tears. This seemingly small but so meaningful action was proof that Rex was beginning to overcome his barriers. "That's you, partner. You're still in there," Jack said in a choked voice. He picked up the ball again and repeated the gesture. This time, Rex ran faster, his tail wagging lightly as he returned. The progress felt almost magical, as if weeks of patience had finally paid off. For Jack, every step Rex took was a victory over the traumas they had both endured. That night, Rex lay beside Jack on the couch for the first time since his arrival. His head rested on Jack's leg. Jack didn't speak, didn't move. He let the silence speak for itself. It was a moment of rebuilding, a slow reestablishment of trust. As Jack gently petted Rex's head, he knew he would never give up on his friend, the one who had once saved his life, no matter how long it took. The morning began with birds chirping in the yard, but something even more significant happened inside the house. Rex stood in the center of the room, his eyes fixed on Jack. Jack held a leash in one hand and an old military vest in the other. "Today's the big day, buddy," Jack said with a hopeful smile. He had decided to take Rex to a special place, a nearby park that had been their favorite spot on training-free days. It wasn't just a test, it was also an opportunity to see how far they had come on the road to recovery. On the way to the park, Rex seemed more relaxed than ever. In the truck's back seat, he leaned his head slightly out the open window, letting the wind brush over his face. Jack watched him through the rearview mirror, feeling a mix of pride and relief. He had fought for weeks to bring the dog back, the one who meant so much to him. Now this moment felt like a milestone, like old times. "What?" Jack murmured, not expecting an answer. When they arrived at the park, Jack released Rex's leash and reached for the rubber ball again. Rex stood still for a moment, analyzing his surroundings. But instead of hesitating like before, he immediately ran when Jack threw the ball. The two of them played for hours, as if time and trauma had never existed. Jack increasingly felt that Rex was becoming the dog he once knew, but he also understood that they had both changed forever. They weren't the same as before, but that didn't mean they couldn't build something new. In the late afternoon as the sun set, Jack sat on one of the park benches. Rex lay next to him, his head resting on Jack's leg, staring into the distance. A deep sense of peace filled Jack's chest. A sense of peace washed over him. "I told you I wouldn't give up on you, Rex," he whispered, gently stroking the dog's head for the first time in years. Jack felt as if a part of him had been restored. Rex was not just a dog, he was a symbol of everything they had survived and overcome together. As they drove home that night, Jack knew that the future, though uncertain, was something he could face with Rex by his side. With his loyalty and courage, Rex had found his way back into Jack's heart. And Jack had learned that patience, love, and determination could heal even the deepest wounds. They were whole again, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Thanks to our valued viewers, we continue to improve every day. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up.